Being king is far from simple. In just 2.5 years on the throne, Charles III has impressed royal watchers with his steadiness. The monarchy has survived scandals, wars, abdications, and betrayals, but few developments have shaken its image as much as what recently unfolded. Prince William took a step that no one expected. He revoked Archie's royal title, a decision that stunned palace staff, shocked the media, and sparked waves of reaction across the Atlantic and online. It wasn't tied to a memoir, a documentary, or even a leaked interview. Instead, it came from something deeply personal, an incident involving Prince George. At a private family gathering meant to strengthen ties among the younger royals, tensions erupted. According to palace insiders, Archie allegedly insulted, mocked, and even shoved his cousin George. Witnesses described George as visibly shaken, later confiding to Kate that he felt humiliated. When William learned what had happened, he acted immediately. To him, this wasn't a minor childhood spat. It was a violation of dignity and a painful reminder of his own struggles growing up under the public eye. He reportedly told aides, "This ends here. If he can't carry the title with respect, he won't carry it at all." Meghan's response was fierce, calling the move cruel and personal. Yet to William, and to much of the British public, it was about drawing a line. The monarchy, he signaled, would no longer hesitate to protect itself, even from its own family. The gathering itself had been organized by Kate as a gesture of goodwill. George, Charlotte, and Louis joined their cousins Archie and Lilibet, who had traveled with Harry and Meghan under what sources described as King Charles's olive branch. The day began with warmth and optimism, but unease quickly surfaced once Archie arrived. Staff described him as carrying himself with bold confidence, dressed in a bomber jacket and trendy trainers, exuding a Hollywood edge that contrasted sharply with the Windsor setting. The children had been invited to enjoy a simple garden game, an obstacle course, bean bags, and light relay races. For a while, everything was cheerful. George, leading his team, won a small victory. That was when things reportedly went wrong. Archie teased him loudly, mocking George's walk and calling him Robot King, then making a joke about being forced to bow even in his sleep. George tried to brush it off, but the remarks continued. Archie poked fun at him for wearing ties and suggested he wasn't even allowed to pick his own cereal. Witnesses said George went from confused to hurt. Then, during the sprint, Archie shoved him from behind. George stumbled, fell forward into the grass, and scraped his knees. But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. George stood up quietly, brushing dirt from his hands. Kate, having seen enough, quickly stepped between the boys. She checked on George but gave Archie only a look, sharp enough, according to staff, to silence the entire garden. Charlotte froze. Louis went quiet, and even Lilibet stood still. Kate calmly led her children inside as aides turned to Harry and Meghan. Harry was said to be embarrassed and offered an apology. Meghan, however, reportedly dismissed the matter, saying boys' roughhouse and that it was being exaggerated. But William saw it differently. To him, it wasn't just playful mischief. It was a deliberate attempt to humiliate George, a sign that Archie had absorbed some of his parents' grievances toward the crown. George refused to rejoin the games, spending the rest of the day quiet and withdrawn. Charlotte stayed close, holding his hand. Staff described him as unusually downcast. According to one insider, it wasn't about the fall, it was about being mocked for the very role he was born into. That night, William resolved to act, not just as a father, but as heir to the throne. He saw it as his duty to defend both his son's dignity and the crown's honor. By morning, consultations were underway. Advisors, lawyers, and King Charles himself were involved. Soon after, a formal notice was filed with the Royal College of Arms. Archie would no longer hold the title of prince. The decision was deliberate. The monarchy had chosen to respond not with public drama, but with one of its most powerful tools, silence and the quiet removal of privilege. When William first heard the words "George was shoved," his composure broke. Staff described a sudden shift. Gone was the careful diplomatic statesman. In his place was a father with a steely resolve. Without raising his voice, William ordered, "Get Harry." The brothers hadn't spoken directly in months, but this time William wanted answers. Their exchange was brief and tense. William accused Harry of letting his son mock and hurt George under our roof. Harry apologized, admitting he hadn't known the full story, but William was unmoved. "This isn't only about George," he reportedly said. "It's about everything your family has brought onto mine. Enough is enough." Meghan's reaction only made things worse. She began telling allies it was a setup, that palace aides had exaggerated events, and that William and Kate's children were being used to make her son look bad. For William, that was the final straw. When William heard that Meghan had brushed the whole incident off as nothing more than boys being boys, his patience ended. He entered a closed meeting with his legal and royal advisers and spoke just one decisive line. If Archie could not carry the title with dignity, then he would not carry it at all. Remove it. The room fell silent. No modern monarch had ever taken away a child's royal title from within the family. But William was firm. He wasn't speaking as Harry's brother anymore. He was speaking as heir to the throne, and more importantly, as a father who refused to see his son humiliated for fulfilling his role. King Charles was informed soon after. He didn't resist. He simply gave a slow nod and said quietly, "Then so be it." What followed was carried out discreetly within palace walls. To the public, it would appear to be a reclassification of titles in line with the Sussexes' non-working royal status. But those inside the institution knew differently. This was not administration. It was consequence, protection, and assertion of power. For William, it was deeply personal. Years of strained attempts to reconcile with Harry and Meghan had left the family burned. Every offer of peace had turned into betrayal, every gesture of goodwill into another headline. But this time was different. This time, it was his son, the future king, who had been demeaned. William signed the papers with resolve. The message was clear. The crown does not shield those who undermine its future. A boundary had been drawn, and it was historic. The reaction in Montecito was explosive. Meghan, learning the news in a strained phone call from Harry, was said to erupt. One staff member described her fury as immediate and fierce. "They've erased my son as though he never existed." What followed was chaos. Doors slammed, lawyers were called, and her PR team was summoned. Plans were quickly sketched to reframe the story, casting the title removal not as discipline but as a vendetta. To Meghan, this had nothing to do with George or a garden quarrel. It was about power and control. She reportedly told Harry, "This is why I walked away. I won't bow." Behind closed doors, she prepared a counteroffensive. Rumors spread that her team was arranging a major U.S. interview to share her side, complete with phrases like racism, sabotage, and character assassination. Her anger only grew when the palace refused to respond. No statement, no denial, no counter. Just silence. She had expected uproar, perhaps even public sympathy. Instead, many outlets framed the move as duty, not cruelty. Morning talk shows called it a long-overdue assertion of royal authority. Online, comments spread quickly, with one viral remark cutting particularly deep. "Meghan wants royal titles without royal responsibilities. You can't have both." The next morning, photographers captured Meghan walking barefoot along a Montecito path, Archie's hand in hers, both framed by golden light. The image looked serene, but insiders said it was anything but. It was the opening shot of her counter-narrative. her attempt to turn a royal punishment into a public reckoning. Meghan's carefully staged walk with Archie, barefoot, hand in hand, framed in golden California light, was designed to soften the story. It was meant to show her as a loving mother, a victim, an outsider still leading with compassion. But the public wasn't convinced. "Your son mocked the future king. Actions have consequences," one comment read bluntly. Behind closed doors, the Sussex household was unraveling. Harry withdrew into himself, while Meghan doubled down on her media strategy. She blamed him for not protecting their children, for letting William win. For her, the loss of Archie's title was not just symbolic. It was proof that her children no longer held the validation she believed the monarchy owed them. That illusion was gone, and with it, her leverage. At Kensington Palace, the silence remained deliberate. William wasn't second-guessing his decision. He wasn't preparing a statement or trying to manage the optics. He was focused on something deeper, his mother's lessons. "When no one defends you, you remember it forever," he reportedly told an advisor. "I will not let George carry that." Diana had raised her sons to see humanity above hierarchy. She had tried to shield them from the cold traditions of the institution, taking them to fast food restaurants, amusement parks, and charity visits, not for appearances, but for empathy. William had watched her fight to give them protection and dignity. Now, decades later, George's quiet resilience was being tested in the same way. George had never complained. He smiled through rehearsed etiquette, public appearances, even the painful march behind his great-grandmother's coffin. But when Archie mocked him for exactly that composure, William knew the response had to be firm, not gentle. It was about more than one afternoon in a garden. It was about drawing a line that behavior mattered as much as blood. "Diana didn't raise us to wear crowns," William was quoted as saying. "She raised us to earn them." To him, stripping Archie's title was not punishment, but protection, a safeguard for George before the burden became unbearable, before he grew to resent his inheritance. Not everyone inside the royal family agreed with the optics, but many quietly supported him. The message was unmistakable. A title without respect means nothing. And for George, it meant something greater, proof that his father would stand up for him, not just as a prince but as a child. In William's mind, it was the act Diana herself had never been able to take. A decisive boundary, drawn not in anger, but in love. Archie lost a title, but George gained something much stronger, the knowledge that his father's protection was absolute. As the news broke across the UK and beyond, the reaction was immediate. Headlines shouted, "Archie stripped of title," "George defended," "William draws the line." Unlike previous royal disputes that split public opinion, this time the mood was largely united. Social media flooded with support, trending tags like #ProtectGeorge, #FutureKing, #WilliamDid. One historian's post went viral. When Harry and Meghan left, they wanted freedom from the rules of royalty. They are now shocked to learn those rules apply to their children as well. William's decision struck a rare chord of unity across Britain. Comment sections on YouTube, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, and even Reddit echoed the same message. Archie insulted the future king, and William responded not as a politician or strategist, but as a father. For many, it wasn't an overreaction. It was the only reaction. "You can't enjoy royal privilege without accepting royal responsibility," one reader wrote. Another added, "George carried himself with dignity at the Queen's funeral. That's who we want as king." For once, even Meghan's usual defenders in the press struggled to spin the story. While some American outlets raised concerns about fairness and childhood trauma, British voices zeroed in on one issue: the dignity of Prince George. A veteran BBC anchor put it bluntly, "What are we doing if a child who is third in line to the throne is mocked by his cousin and no one steps in? William did what any father, or any future king, would do." Across Middle England, the support was even stronger. Call-in radio shows lit up with praise. "We adore Diana, and George is her grandson," one caller said. "He deserves protection, not ridicule." Another added, "That boy already carries the weight of the crown. William is right to defend him." The tabloids didn't hold back either. The Sun splashed with the headline, "Prince versus Prince," and the right one won. But the most powerful voices weren't from newspapers. They came from ordinary parents. Parenting forums, Facebook groups, and TikTok videos flooded with support. One viral clip showed a father declaring, "If a kid pushed my son and mocked him for simply being who he was raised to be, I'd do more than strip a title." It struck a nerve. For once, the monarchy was not seen as cold or out of touch, but human. A father chose his son over spin, action over PR. There were no statements, no staged photos, just quiet, decisive authority. The public understood, and they sided with him. The symbolism was unmistakable. Archie may have been born into royalty, but George was born to embody it. William hadn't punished a child. He had defended an heir. And in doing so, he reminded the world what the crown stands for. Royal titles have always represented power and privilege. But on this day, without ceremony or spectacle, one was taken away. Not through anger, but through principle. The message was clear. Dignity is not negotiable. William's move showed he is ready for the throne. He didn't act from spite or weakness. He acted from strength. The strength to defend his son, his lineage, and his mother's legacy. Diana had fought to protect her boys from the institution's harshest traditions. Now her eldest son carried that fight forward, showing that royal blood alone is not enough. The crown is not a costume, nor a birthright to be taken for granted. It is duty, grace, and earned respect. And when that respect is broken, even by family, the response is swift. Meghan may rage, Harry may retreat, critics may argue, but the monarchy did not flinch. It did not bow. It acted. Archie walks without a title. George walks forward with the knowledge that his father stood for him when it mattered. In the centuries-long history of the crown, this may seem a footnote, but for this generation, it was a turning point. A prince lost his title, an heir was defended, and the monarchy's future grew just a little stronger, not with pageantry, but with resolve.